Hey, Jennifer, just want to give you a critique on that portrait that you posted on Facebook. First of all, I want to say outstanding job. You definitely have skills. Looks so much like the reference photo. It's amazing. You did a really good job on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a side-by-side comparison between, and I don't know if I've done a critique for you yet, a video critique, but I'm going to set up a side-by-side comparison of the reference photo and then your actual painting. And then we'll just go through and see if there's anything that can be done to improve it. Shouldn't be a lot, but you know, a little bit here and there always helps. So let me switch over to the other screen here and we'll get started. All right, so I don't have quite as much detail as what I'd like in the reference photo, but I can still see pretty well what's going on. Like I say, you've just done a really good job. I think the thing I like about this the most is the contrast that you've developed between the subjects and the background, which is what I mentioned on the actual post on Facebook. And that always is a good thing if you can get a good amount of contrast. Really makes the subjects pop out and stand out. So it looks like a very professional portrait, and yeah, I really like it. Now let me see if there's anything that could be improved on it. As far as accuracy goes, one thing I noticed right away, of course some of these things could be personal choices, but the photo, her ear is kind of angled a little bit differently, and maybe you decided to round it off a little bit. I don't know, but I just noticed the shape of it's a little different. It's not a huge thing, but that's actually how it appears to me in the reference photo. Looking at the facial features, I think you've really captured this woman's look. Again, with this blurry photo, I can't tell how much, you know, detail is missing. And maybe you have more because you have the actual print in your studio. But it seems like, you know, you've outlined the eyes a little bit more than what would be seen in the painting. And let me zoom in a little bit. I will say that oftentimes when we paint eyes, we do tend to paint the whites of the eyes a little too strong, a little too bright. So along the edges, I think it would benefit by having a little bit of shading to transition between that edge of her eyelid into the white of the eye. Because normally there's a shadow cast by the eyelashes, and even a little bit from the thickness of the eyelid itself. And so if you can bring that shadow into the white of the eye, just with a little gradation, I think that'll give it a little more depth. You'd want to do the same thing. Zoom in a little bit on this eye, and you'd want that white area here to be a little bit darker. The brightest value should be right here, but this here should be a little darker, okay? Because that's what I see in the reference photo. It's just a little darker right there and a little brighter right here. On this side, the brightest point seems to be just right there, whereas this part here is a little bit darker. So again, I think if you darken this a little bit, that would help. And maybe add a little bit of pink right in here. So often the tear ducts get that kind of pinkish area. That's just part of the eye, the structure of it, and that would help. Possibly the edge of this nostril is a little too sharp. You might want to get a little more of a gradation there, blending into this section right here. That's at least what I see, even though it's blurry. I just see more of a gradation. I don't know if I can zoom it in. No, not any more than that, but I do see that it's very dark, and then it blends out a little bit from there. If you take a look at it, you'll see that too. I really like how you've just modeled the shading within the face. It has a lot of luminosity and depth, and there's a lot of variety. These little tones, you have a very gradual tone here from the bottom of the cheek going up, and that's well done. It's very faint. I don't have anything to say about that, really. Let me zoom out. I would say one thing that could improve it would be to get a little more of a transition between the edge here. This is a little too stark of a contrast. Here we have just a little more gradation, and the color is a little cooler. It might be pulling in some of the coloring from his suit, but it's just a cooler tone. And if you look in the reference picture, there's just a little more of a transition between the dark background and into the flesh tone. And I think that you overemphasized this just a little bit. Rather, this value should be a little darker. Again, I'm having to be pretty picky here because this is so well done, but I just want to help you make a great portrait even better. Okay. Now looking at the structure of her neck, and this is always a challenging part because there's so many veins and tendons and different things going on in the neck, but what I see is there's a shadow right here, and that, well, it doesn't end like that, but it's kind of a triangular shape, and it breaks off and intersects this triangular shape right here. And then you kind of have this somewhat ambiguous shadow right in here. And that's just part of the tendons of the neck. And depending on a person's age, that obviously changes appearance over time, but you'd want to have that shadow in there. Or actually, it would be more of a highlight. You see this lighter value, and it's kind of equivalent to this value here. You'd want to put that into there. So again, you want to have this shape a little lighter. Then you also want to have that triangular shape down here. Let me clear it off. It's starting to look like a football game after the commentators highlight everything. But again, just to see this shape, this triangular shape here, this triangular shape here, you want to emphasize that somewhere within her neck. Also, I think that this shadow here is a little too sharply defined. It's just a little more ambiguous right here. Also, a little more of a highlight and lighter value. You might have darkened that just a bit too much. It doesn't look really out of place, but it doesn't follow the photograph exactly. And this line here goes down too far, again, from the neck. Let me clear this off. Really, the neck stops just about here. All right, and then this line here kind of makes it look like her neck is too long. Now, let me go over and switch to, well, actually, before I finish up here, just one last thing on the neck. You want to emphasize this shadow right here. You know, that's very dark shadow because of the flash photography, and you want to emphasize that. Also soften the edge of this dress because that's receding away from the light, the angle that she's turned at. It's catching less light, and there's just probably a little bit of a shadow coming from her dress onto her skin. And so you want to get a little more of a gradation and a soft edge in those areas. It can be sharper on this side, but it shouldn't be as sharp there. Okay, now with that, I'll move over to the man. We'll check this. Again, excellent job. I would say that the white of the eye is a little too bright. If you notice, even though I can't zoom in anymore, the value here within his eye is probably about the same as the flesh tone up here, so it shouldn't be quite that bright. The only part that's catching the light is right here, and that's going to be brighter. Again, right here, but the other parts are going to be a little darker. Can't quite see the eyelid detail, but it's possible that you over define the edge of his eyelid. And that you want to soften that up. It seems like it's just very ambiguous up here. I don't think it's quite as defined, but again, I can't see the detail in the photo like I'd like to. The shape of the nose maybe could be changed just a tiny bit. It looks like you angled this nostril down just a little bit too sharp, but it should actually be angled more like that. All right, if you can see that difference, it's just tilted down too much a little. There's a little more of a shadow in here under the neck that you might want to emphasize, just in there. And a little thicker shadow underneath the chin being cast on his neck. Now, other than that, I think it looks good. I maybe want to see just a little shadow coming from his tie being cast onto the white of his shirt, just to soften those edges a little bit. This is where you're going to want it to be sharp right here, but on this side, you're going to want it to be a little more muted and have a gradation between the dark of his suit into the white of his shirt. So anyway, I'm going to, well, hold on. I'll say one last thing. One last thing. All right. Just noticed this line here might be a little too dark. In the reference photo, it doesn't look like that line, that part, you know, under his eye where the socket, you know, of his bone structure beneath causes that depression in his face. I think that's overemphasized. So you'd want to soften that up. And if this is a painting for a client, they probably appreciate that anyway, if you soften up any wrinkles in their face. But seeing as how in the reference photo it's not quite as dark as what you made it, it would probably be a good idea to soften that up as well. But anyway, well, Jen, I hope this helps you out. Again, fantastic painting. Just a few tips to make it even better. And if you need any more help, just let me know. You can always email me. I respond to my email a little quicker than I do to Facebook posts. But anyway, be blessed, and we'll be in touch.